your invitation to participate in this conference. And those two previous papers were really fascinating, and somehow I would like to relate both of them during my presentation. Especially the last one, which mentioned Chinese as a minority within a majority Muslim country. And I would like to talk about a situation that is the direct opposite of the situation of Chinese in Indonesia, mainly the Muslim minority. Sorry? Microphone. All right, it's not a cordless one, but okay.
That one will turn off all the time. I don't know the reason.
Okay, I've already used some time. Like it. All right, okay, cheers. I'd like to talk about the dilemmas of the modern Muslim Chinese identity. And I would like to start by pointing that I consider myself mostly historian, and historians do have a lot of trouble with the concept of ethnicity, and especially those who deal with modern China. Many papers have addressed that, so I'm not going to delve into deeper. But I do have a very distinct feeling that, like President CIECIURA has stressed in his book, that the Chinese history.
I just said that you see
has to be saved from the nation. So I get a similar feeling that the Chinese Muslim history has to be saved from the Minzu. Because this whole historiography somehow got hijacked or shanghaied by the concept itself. And whenever I give presentation at a conference where there are some Chinese scholars of China, especially those trained in mainland China, I always get reminded that, why didn't you mention that they are ethnic, that they are Minzu? You have to remember that. And personally, I do not really have feeling myself studying Chinese Muslims, that I'm studying an ethnic phenomena, or at least I feel I study much more. And study of Chinese Muslims is also truly study of China itself. So the Muslim minority in China is so much more than this very tight drawer of Minzu that a lot of scholarship is trying to put that in. And a lot of scholars who specialize in the study of the Chinese Muslim history have addressed that, and a lot of historians are not really interested in looking at the Hui or the Chinese Muslims from an ethnic perspective. They're more interested in how the Hui culture, the Chinese Muslim culture, locates between the Islamic and the Chinese cultures, civilizations. And just to name a few scholars who look at the Hui from a critical point of ethnicity is Sribenjol Benita, who prefers to define the Sino-Muslim culture as a simultaneous belonging to two different great civilizations, or late Elizabeth Allaire, who described the Hui culture as juxtapositioning of the Muslim and Chinese elements within one cultural whole. And this problem has also been addressed by Jonathan Lippmann, who has also criticized the too much attention being paid to the concept of ethnicity and study of the Chinese Muslim culture and history, where he called the whole Minzu tradition a paradigm that is very difficult to question these days, but that nevertheless should be questioned. So I would like to address all those issues. And of course, as a historian, I'm interested in the history of the concept of Muslims as an ethnicity in China. And I'll try to talk a little bit about that. And for a lot of Muslims in the Muslim world, outside of China, the previous speaker has addressed the Chinese in Indonesia. When you look at the map of the Chinese diaspora, in some places, Chineseness is understood as almost being the same thing as Muslimness. In some places in Southeast Asia or in Central Asia, I think Adam would have tons of interesting insights into that. The Chineseness is understood as being a Muslim at the same time. For example, in the north of Thailand, there are groups of Yunnanese Muslims, same is true for northern Burma, who are being perceived by the local populations as Chinese, and it's only natural for the local populations that the Chinese are Muslim. And here we have an example of a Chinese mosque in Chiang Mai in northern Thailand, and you can see the entrance. There is a wooden board over the main entrance, and it states in Chinese that it's also in Arabic and Thai, but the local community is almost entirely Yunnanese-speaking, descendants of Yunnanese traders. That this is a 回教礼拜堂. The blackboard, the wooden board, of course, uses the Chinese traditional term for Islam, and it also states the date of establishment of the mosque using the Republican calendar. So you can also see that it's not only cultural, but it's also political in many senses. That the Chinese Muslims in Thailand or I don't know, Central Asia is probably slightly different from this case, identify themselves as Chinese. And of course, the Chinese Muslims have to somehow negotiate their identity, being located between those two different cultural spheres or civilizational spheres. And as Muslims, they tend to get in touch with their co-religionists in other countries a lot, especially when it comes to performing the Hajj. And every year, thousands of Chinese Muslims do the Hajj. They go to Mecca, they travel to Saudi Arabia on chartered flights by the Islamic Association. This year, the Islamic Association in China had to charter more than 30 jets to ship the Chinese pilgrims to Mecca because it's such a huge undertaking. And when they travel to Mecca, they act there as representatives of China, really. They are equipped by the Islamic Association with vests that bear the Chinese national flag, the Chinese name for China, and an Arabic text that says Haji al-Sini, the Chinese Haji. So, you know, it's almost like an astronaut vest. You know, you have your national flag, and you're being taught before you depart by the association on what to tell foreign Muslims, on how to relate to them, and of course you're being taught to act as a patriot, Chinese patriot. And I would say that a lot of the pilgrims have absolutely no trouble with that. They totally associate with China and with Chineseness. So, like Adam has said, some minorities are being made bow to the Chinese flag. In the case of the Hui, nobody really has to do that. They bow themselves because their modern identity has been shaped in that way that they absolutely find no conflict between the political and the religious sides of their identity.